After a little summer break, I'm now back with number 7 in my series of thematic investing. And today it's about batteries and why you should add batteries to your portfolio. Many investors assume batteries is really all about electric cars, but that's not true at all. I can think of at least 4 reasons why you should add batteries to your portfolio. Number 1, China. And the growing role of that country. Number 2, the rapidly growing need for grid batteries. Number 3, the political turmoil in the US. And number 4, the forthcoming introduction of so-called solid-state batteries. And I will now walk you through each of those 4 reasons. Let's start with China. China is obviously a massive country, for 1.3, 1.4 billion people. But China is also big when it comes to batteries. 80% of all lithium-ion batteries that are produced around the world come from China. And therefore, the Chinese battery industry dominates the world. But not only that, the Chinese have, in recent years, produced too many batteries. Chinese have suffered from or continue to suffer from what we call an oversupply problem. There are simply too many battery manufacturers in China. And that has caused battery prices, lithium-ion battery prices, to fall quite significantly. The point here is that the Chinese are now cutting back significantly on capex. As of the latest count, the information I have access to, Chinese capex on lithium-ion batteries is now down 40% versus last year. And therefore, sooner or later, supply and demand will come back into place again. And that will have a significant impact on lithium-ion batteries. Adding to that, the US government has recently increased import tariffs on lithium-ion batteries from China. The increase was by 17.5%, and the new import tariff rate is 28.4%. And that's no coincidence, because that's roughly how much more expensive batteries produced in the US are when compared to Chinese manufactured batteries. The sun doesn't always shine and the wind doesn't always blow. And for that reason, we can't really rely on renewable energy forms providing all the electricity we need. Obviously, if we can improve grid batteries and capacity of grid batteries, we can fix that problem, but that's still many years away. The most powerful grid batteries that we have anywhere in the world are those that have been put in place in the state of California. And I spoke to a senior official at the local government in the state of California recently about it. And he told me that in the worst case, in other words, if everything stops working, how many hours do you think that these grid batteries in California can keep all the supply of electricity to all people in California? The answer is about 3 hours. And 3 hours is not nearly enough for a modern day economy. Imagine that you have to call your office, you have to call your manager in the office and tell him that you're not coming into the office next morning because you can't charge your battery. Or imagine that you open your fridge or your freezer and it's 25 degrees inside and you have to throw out all the food because it's gone. That's clearly not acceptable. And for that reason, we need more powerful grid batteries if we're really serious about the green transition. Let's talk a little bit about the third item that I mentioned earlier, political turmoil in the US. Until recently, until not that many weeks ago, everybody assumed that Donald Trump would run away with victory in November. Obviously, things might have changed a little bit with Kamala Harris taking over from Joe Biden, but there's still an awful lot of so-called Trump trades going on in the equity market. One of these so-called Trump trades is going short anything to do with the green transition. And investors have assumed, or at least did assume until quite recently, that Trump would win quite convincingly. That has put a lot of pressure on battery stocks, which we talked about earlier, but also put pressure on companies' stocks to do with the green transition. But let's talk a little bit about the potential of Trump being able to change anything. As you may recall, in August 22, Joe Biden introduced the so-called Inflation Reduction Act. And the Inflation Reduction Act will cause the US government to spend up towards $1 trillion over the next 8 years, between 24 and 32. And that's obviously a big number. And if investors assume that Donald Trump can stop that from happening, no wonder that green stocks are doing poorly. But let's just look at the different scenarios. Scenario number one, Kamala Harris wins. If she wins, regardless of who takes control of Congress, the Inflation Reduction Act will survive, because nobody can change that in Congress without the president signing under, and she won't sign off on that. Option number two, Trump wins and the Republicans win both chambers in Congress, both the House and the Senate. And that's clearly the outcome or the scenario you should worry about. Because if Trump is president and Republicans control both chambers in Congress, the chances are that large parts of the Inflation Reduction Act will be repealed. However, is that very likely? I don't really think so. At least if you look at the opinion polls as they stand right now, it's not very likely. Option number three, Trump wins, but the Republicans do not control both chambers in Congress. Under that scenario, there's not much to worry about. It'll be months, if not years, of negotiations. There will definitely be deals done in the corridors of Capitol Hill. But Trump, even if he's president, unless he controls both chambers of Congress, he cannot really do massive damage to the Inflation Reduction Act. So from an investment point of view, what does that mean? Option number one, option number three, which I just talked about, outcome number one, outcome number three that I just talked about, are far more likely than outcome number two. And therefore, it's an opportunity to invest in green stocks and therefore also in battery stocks, because the chances are not very high that Trump wins and Republicans take control of both chambers. So let's talk a little bit about the last of the four issues that I raised earlier, solid-state batteries. Solid-state batteries are also based on lithium, just like the lithium-ion batteries. But solid-state batteries are fundamentally different from lithium-ion batteries. In a lithium battery, there's something called an electrolyte. And in a lithium-ion batteries, that electrolyte is made of liquids. In a solid-state battery, there are no liquids. And that's the fundamental difference between the two. And that gives the battery four distinct advantages over the old-fashioned lithium-ion battery. Number one, the car can drive further. A typical lithium-ion battery-powered electric car can drive maybe 300 miles, at best 400 miles. If a new solid-state battery is implemented or installed in the car, it can drive at least twice as long. Number two, charging time. The lithium-ion battery, I have an electric car myself, and I can spend 4 or 5 hours fully charging my car at home. The new solid-state battery will allow me to charge the car in about 10 to 15 minutes. Number three, security. Lithium-ion batteries are flammable. They can go on fire, and that's because of the liquid in the battery. as solid-state batteries do not have the liquid, they are not flammable, and therefore they are far safer. And finally, number 4, as you probably have heard, lithium-ion batteries are not really that functional in colder climates. People living in northern Scandinavia, in Canada, in certain parts of the US are struggling to get a reasonable mileage out of a lithium-ion battery. That's not a problem in solid-state batteries. Solid-state batteries can drive far longer and lose almost no performance in much colder climates. And for those 4 reasons, I'm convinced that solid-state batteries are a true game changer. And when they are rolled out, when they begin to roll them out, and as of the latest count, that's about 2027, the old-fashioned lithium-ion batteries will be phased out very quickly, and people will convert to the new solid-state battery. And that also will increase demand for electric cars quite dramatically. And therefore, it's a key reason why you should invest in battery stocks now. Over the last few months, the market has been obsessed. I know it's a strong word, but I feel the market has really been obsessed with the so-called Trump trades. Trades that are likely to make money, assuming that Trump becomes president. And I talked a little bit about it earlier. The dynamics have changed a little bit with Kamala Harris replacing Joe Biden. But the green stocks that took a hammering earlier in the year when it became obvious that Biden didn't stand a chance against Donald Trump, those green stocks have never fully recovered. And therefore, there's still an element of Trump trades in all this. But I think the mistake investors make is that they assume, or they often assume, that the investment in batteries is all about electric cars. And I hope with what I've said today that I can sort of kill that myth, because it's not about electric cars only. I think the need for bigger grid batteries is even bigger opportunity than the electric car opportunity. But I also want to say something else, and that's the forthcoming introduction of solid-state batteries. Be careful what you invest in when you invest in batteries, because manufacturers of solid-state batteries are not the same as manufacturers of lithium-ion batteries. You're more than welcome to call me or to email me. You can find the details on our website. But it's a myth that the same companies will benefit going forward, because that's not correct. It will be a different set of companies. And you can see that in terms of, if you look at the big car manufacturers like Toyota, Tesla, Ford, General Motors, Volkswagen, who they sign up with. They sign up with different companies to produce these solid-state batteries, and therefore you need to do your homework.